Hey everybody, it's Robert Dunt from ArtTop10.com, and I'm very pleased this morning to be chatting with James Faure Walker. Hello, James.
Hello there.
Hi. Now, I've had a quick look at your work, and it seems there's all sorts of things from digital to painting to watercolours. Perhaps you'd like to show us a sort of overview of it to start with.
Absolutely. So I'll just go into this share screen. Okay. For the last over 3 months now, I've been unable to get to my studio, which is 7 or 8 miles away, and so like everyone, been in lockdown. And I decided to concentrate exclusively on my digital work, which I do every day anyway, and I also do drawing and this, but normally I do it in conjunction with working with regular paints in the studio.
Okay.
And I've been doing this for quite a while, more than about 32 years now.
Wow.
But I've not sort of concentrated on it so much. And what you're looking at here is one of quite a number, over 100 now. I've done. I try to do at least one every day.
Okay.
And the odd thing about it is that I ended up, as a theme, concentrating on vintage radios.
Oh,
it's
right.
weird, only because I've got an old radio next to me, but
Okay.
it's nothing very explicit. But it's just playing around. Now, just to be clear, because whenever I sort of tell people about if I do, they get probably a different impression to what I actually do. So these will all end up as physical pictures.
Okay.
They're not, although they're very big files, but I have them printed not here on big printers. I get them printed at the London Print Studio in Harrow Road.
Okay.
And so they are conceived as physical pictures. This is the workstation I'm using, so it's not like just working with an iPad. These are quite complex, very good systems that I've been using for a long time now. And in fact, this is a program I mainly use called Painter, which has been going about 25 years. And I actually got to know the people that originated it. I did some research on this years ago.
Okay.
So that's my sort of home studio where I've been working. This is my physical studio. And
cool.
This was a corner of it actually last summer, and you can see this is in the middle there is my physical computer, is my paint station. And whenever we have open studios, we have them very regularly.
Yeah.
People always come in and want to photograph that, and I say you can
brilliant.
photograph it, provided I can take a photograph of you photographing it. So I have a lot of photos of people with their iPhones, because I find it interesting that they look at the physical evidence of paint, which is more interesting probably than the pictures. But I should mention that I think I'm the longest running continual space studios renter. I've had a studio since 1971.
Wow, that's one.
I was first in Martello Street for 35 years, and now I'm in Bridget Riley Studios for about 40 years now. But anyway, if you look at the top right there, there's this is an example of what I'm trying to say. That well, first of all, I want the message to get across that you can see a watercolor in the back there framed, and 2 oil paintings and things. And on the right, there's what is called a digital print. Okay. Now this is one I did about 5 years ago, which I called Lapwings, quite simply because it's got quite a few lapwings in it. Which I photographed at Minsmere. I'm a bit of a birder. Okay. And one of the things about this was I'm a member of the London group, and we had an auction, and I'd done this before, and the idea was that you paid, I forget what it was, for a ticket, and the ticket consisted of a picture that had been cut into 64 or 120 bits. So I had to make a picture that was sufficiently complex to be sliced up. And it was very difficult to do because it's large, because I had to put each one on the back had a different number printed. I started as a commission this for a picture in a building, and I never got that, but
Yeah.
I did it over Christmas about 5 or 6 years ago. And
Okay.
anyway, this is a close-up of my so-called workstation from yesterday.
Okay.
And so you can see it may look chaotic, but
No.
what it's got in common with my digital one is I've got probably several hundred brushes, some of which are customized.
Okay.
I've got loads of, everything is actually organized, so it probably doesn't look like that.
No, it looks
I think
more
actually
organized than mine.
Do you mind? I'll just carry on, and it just won't be too long.
Go.
This is this gives you a sense of the scale of paintings, and this is rough on the left are my watercolors. Should I do there too? And I'll just show you this painting, which I did I photographed this yesterday, by the way. So this is a painting I did earlier this year.
Okay. Interesting.
And please don't ask me why it is, because every picture has a problem. And my son lives in Valencia, and I went there to see him and also see a fantastic Dubuffet exhibition. Okay. And I always photograph people in the main square there. And I thought, what would happen if I put these two figures in this picture? And so I have various devices for moving between, say, oil paint and digital, and this is one of the ways. I've got a horrible feeling it looks a bit like the last, the Marianne Bad film, but it's not. Nothing is meant. I don't really have any ideas or intentions.
Okay.
And this picture was the one that preceded that, which was the same sort of scale, which was I called Coastal. Again, the solution was to impose some very fast digital pictures over the top of this. This is all physical, obviously.
I really like that.
Sorry, if you wanted to interject, I'm talking too much probably, but
no. I really like the picture. I love the overlaid of the dots. Keep going.
Okay. Just to give you the general idea, and this is a watercolor done by about the same sort of time, and I've got lots to say about watercolor. I do one when I'm at the studio. I do at least one every day. Quite a large one, and it's a fabulous medium. But it's lots to say about it. But it requires a different temperament, obviously, to oil painting or digitals. But they're all sort of painting, in my opinion. This is a painting of a couple of years ago, which I only show because it's large.
Yeah.
Like the other one, it's about 6 feet across. But it's the forms that are sort of the coloured bits I did first, and they came straight out of a watercolour. But I did this actually all in one day because which is unusual. I spend much longer on oil paintings, and I'd done several pictures with photos of puppets, of clowns and things, which I had models, and so this one, I don't know. I called it Bob. But there's no sort of big message, except maybe don't take things too seriously. And this is actually a gouache that I did about 4 or 5 years ago. And often there's a whole lot of accidents in these pictures, and very obviously. And I suppose one thing I've learned is that when I do things that aren't too deliberate, they're often better than the ones I've thought about. But it does require an awful lot of practice, so I have a very, very high failure rate.
Okay.
So I only show things that are, most of the things don't work out, but some do. This picture is a couple of years ago again, and it's entirely flat. It's a digital print. It's entirely flat, but when I used to teach, I often gave as an exercise, asked the students to do a drawing which they knew they were going to tear up.
Okay.
And then another one, the second drawing they had to make it into a waste paper basket. And the third drawing was to put the torn up drawing inside the waste paper basket. And then they could do the third drawing, whatever they liked. And so I do this myself sometimes, except I do pictures that are on lining paper, it's very cheap, and which I tear up. I also tear up other stuff and photograph it. And so this is just a case where but it's both digital and watercolor and so on. But it's a bit of a tricky kind of thing, but fun.
It's really good.
This goes back till 1983. That's, gosh, 37 years ago. I was an artist in residence in Melbourne in Australia, and also I was doing a lecture tour. The reason I was there was partly, I think, because I was still editing Artscribe magazine, which I helped start with some other people back in '76. So that gave me a certain notoriety, probably undeserved. And but I was with John Bellamy in the Phillip Institute in Melbourne, but I did a lecture tour, and the thing I wanted to do was to get to the Barrier Reef, the Great Barrier Reef, which I did. And I called this Harran Islands, which is where David Attenborough did the first of the Life on Earth series with the turtles there. It's a fantastic place, way up in Queensland. And I was snorkeling on the reef there, and it was such an amazing experience. And I thought when I came back, it made me not want to do art criticism or anything anymore, really, because I thought, well, I was giving a lecture in Sydney, and someone interrupted and said, "There's enough of this." I was talking about painting in England. "There's enough of this. What we really want to talk about is who should get into the Sydney Biennale and how unfair it is." And I thought, sunshine, carry on, it's not for me. And so I thought the ecology of the reef was much more interesting. I actually saw sharks and everything, manta rays, and
wow.
In fact, then I had a big bash on my back, and I thought it was a shark, but someone said, "Did you see the shark?" And it was another diver. Anyway, but the other thing that was quite a revelation was that, as you may know, there's some fish are fluorescent, and it was like an introduction to electronic art.
Oh wow!
And the light and everything. So this picture which I've actually got here. It's 10 foot wide. It's very large.
Wow.
And it's going to be shown, I hope, in a kind of mini retrospective at a gallery I show with Felix and Spear later this year.
Okay.
But it sort of opened my eyes to something which people say, dip your head in the reef, and if you're a painter and your life changes. But maybe anyway, it got me into completely rethinking my approach in painting and things. And within a few years, I was heavily into computer graphics. The next picture, by the way, I just thought I'd show is that it may be surprising, but this is a picture I did of a commission called Artists in National Parks, which was from the Victoria and Albert Museum. Not this particular picture, in fact, but this was when I was just beginning to do computer graphics, and it was the hotel we're staying at in Linton, and yes, it's quite a homage to French painting and Bonnard and Braque and all that. But I've been an abstract painter and a figurative one. I didn't really care too much about that, but anyway, it's maybe shows the beginnings of how you might analyze things. And this is much later. This is about 13 years ago. A picture that's quite large, entirely digital, that ended up in the Victor and Albert's Digital Pioneers show. They've got some. That was fantastic. They bought some pictures early on, about 1990. But so this probably would not. If I told you this was based on watercolors that have been turned negative, and this was done really, it's quite rapidly. And in the middle, there's a negative version of a botanical page I got from a drawing book somewhere. But I showed this quite a few different places. If you don't mind, I've just got a couple of more things to show.
Go for it.
I had an email about 11 years ago from Africa saying you have been selected, for this or that. And I thought, oh yeah, it was a time you got a lot of emails about I'm a prince in Nigeria, and can you help me get some money, and all this. So I was a little bit suspicious, but I thought, well, I'll just follow this up. I couldn't believe it. And I said, and it was true. I'd been actually, it was from FIFA, the football people, indirectly. And I was commissioned to be one of the, I think it was 4 UK English artists doing a poster for the 2010 South African World Cup. And I had a massive agreement I had to sign, because people like Ronaldo's image or McDonald's, all these things are all copyright. So you had to do a kind of semi-abstract picture of the football without having any footballers present. In fact, I cheated. I made Brazil in the middle, the winners. But I used it was a fascinating commission, and I made absolutely nothing out of it. I think this company went bust. But I ended up being next to North Korea, which was quite, when Seth Blatter and Quicktime presented it. But the point I want to make is, what I enjoyed about it was that it made you think about things differently, and then that spilled over into a regular oil painting like this. So the same use of forms was in this picture, which I think is it's in a hotel in Yorkshire somewhere.
Okay,
nice. And this then is about 5 or 6 years ago, another large digital piece. The elements in it were photographed from a drawing conference in Porto, I think. I was heavily involved in that. But I just wanted to please, to get across the point, there's a lot of continuity between the different methods. They're not completely separate.
Sure.
And then just finally, these are a couple of radio ones. It's a fascinating. My late brother-in-law collected vintage radios from boot sales and things, and car boot sales, and they all have. I just use them for titles, and but they go back, to the 1930s and so on. But it's not a direct connection. It's just something to take my mind off the problem of making pictures.
Yeah.
And this is just one I did yesterday, which is actually a watercolor underneath it all.
Okay.
Amazing. After 3 months away, I did find I could get back into the pictures I was doing.
Okay.
And the last one I just thought I'd show you here. This is actually a digital picture I did 30 years ago, from 1991. That I was relating these recent pictures to. Well, I've probably talked far too much now, and I just want to get back. I'll do the stop sharing.
It's a fascinating collection of pictures. One of the things I was thinking, you said you've been painting the radio, but the radio is obviously the object of the picture. What would you say is the subject of those paintings?
What's the subject of the radio pictures? Well, here's the book of vintage radios.
Oh, wow.
And there's not a subject. It's just, if you look at the illustrations of some of these are familiar. I've got one very similar to that next to me.
Okay.
They're not. I'm not making any point at all. I don't think I have subjects. I'm not that deep,
Okay. So are you painting in a purely visual fashion?
Would I be painting in a I was thinking about this, and yes and no. I think if I'm the pictures that I do that I reject, I think why do, and I would like to say I'd want a bit of body and soul in a picture, not just something you might call an IKEA bit of wall furnishing or something. I've got I keep my opinions to myself mostly, but I can't stand the idea of doing these awful pictures that I can spend sometimes years on a picture that needs to be thrown away. If I can get it to work, it's not. Yeah, well, maybe just a visual thing in the end, but I'm so bad at doing what I want to do sometimes. I can't be very coherent about it. I don't have an opinion.
No. I mean, I'm primarily an abstract painter, but then I do pictures of things like Yosemite and America sometimes as well, and I tend to try and think I'm doing it visually, but we are thinking about something underneath.
If I may say so, I think there's another way of answering that question, is that most of what we do, especially when we're very young, and I started very young doing oil paintings, only about 9 or 10, you copy other pictures. And I copied actually a lot of marine paintings from a book called British Marine Painting by Oliver Warner. And I didn't know anything about galleries or museums. I just, copied that way. And I think when you go to art school and you see a lot of things, you try and do them yourself. In fact, I saw one of the very early David Hockney shows at the Casman Gallery, and I went back and tried to do my own, and so you could say, well, is that visual or not? But gradually you sort of learn what, you have, if you're a good college, as I was at St. Martin's, which was excellent, you get challenged and criticized and sort of, you find yourself in some ways, and I'll put this another way. There's also a problem in London and England, which you sort of are very aware of if you go to the USA or France, that we don't have a great 20th century tradition of painting, especially of abstract painting. So you realize that you've been copying someone else who has been copying someone else, and so when you go to the source itself, you realize, oh, I got that wrong,
Interesting.
And for example, the very great pictures of Matisse and Braque and Picasso were they visual? Well, they went through a great deal of turmoil and invention, and they didn't just copy what was, they invented something, and you have to respect that and not simply copy what. You have to understand why they did what they did.
Yeah. No, it's a hard thing, isn't it? But you are right. You've got to try and find your own way somehow. Did you always know you were going to be an artist and a painter, or?
I don't know. I think I didn't feel I was an artist, or probably still don't feel I am. But I never used to buy materials for more than a month ahead, because I didn't think, I wasn't sure they'd keep going. But I was my other interest was still is music, of course. But I had a sort of I don't know. I suppose it was quite good to be discouraged, and that helped me to build up a kind of resistance, because a lot of the problems when you're doing painting is how you deal with rejection, which happens quite a lot.
Well, it certainly does, doesn't it?
It's also a problem if you get accepted, and then you think, why am I accepted for this exhibition? It doesn't deserve to be there, and so, I mean, I don't know.
No, it's interesting, actually. I mean, I haven't really talked about it much, but it is a difficult thing to deal with, the rejection, and it's weird. We're in lockdown, but you can feel quite isolated as an artist, can't you?
Well, that was my first thought, and I spent a lot of, in addition to doing these pictures, I was writing this piece for Instant Loveland, where they asked me to do, and I started out by thinking, how do you achieve critical distance when you're? I mean, my normal routine is going to the studio and I have I do go to exhibitions and I see other people, but and I never sort of. I hope I never sort of ask people their opinion of pictures, but I get a sense of, looking at other things, so you have a sense of. But now it's yeah, it's more difficult.
Yeah, no, it is more difficult now. And so yeah, so watercolor. Do you feel watercolor is one of those things that's not really being used as much as it could be these days by contemporary artists?
You're talking about watercolor?
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's watercolor is a fascinating field, and I've been doing that since Miss Broadbent, when I was aged about 5 or 6.
Wow.
When I was in primary school, I was very lucky. I think a lot about this because I'm actually the member of the Royal Watercolor Society of a friend, Bill Henderson, who died last year, unfortunately. He persuaded me to apply about 8 years ago, and I got in. I got well. I should tell you that story, which maybe illuminate it, because
yeah.
I applied, and it's quite. First of all, there's a competition which I went in for, which I encourage anyone to go in for. It's very open, and they've got a gallery at Bankside, and we'll soon have also a gallery right next to the National Gallery, which is amazing. We've got fun. But anyway, I got a picture accepted, and I went to the private view, and it was a cold February. I didn't know anyone there, and my picture was right at the end of this gallery, and it looked so awful. I felt embarrassed that everyone else had got really carefully done, well done pictures, and mine was just embarrassing. And I thought, oh gosh. Oh dear. And so, I mean, mind you, that it was all sorts of various genres of watercolor. And I'd often gone in for the Sunday Times watercolor competition and got in a few times. And I used to stand with my wife then, and we used to laugh at it and say, who would think that would accept it there? And there was someone else would come and say, I know it's not even art. But anyway, at this occasion, I went back. And then a week later, I got a letter in a cream envelope saying that I'd won the Royal Watercolor competition, And
that's fantastic.
Is this right? Well, they had several prizes, so I won the prizes. So I was very proud of. And then the next step is, would you like to apply to be a member? And which I did. And then I just got in, scraped in, and then people said, Bill said, the thing about it is they're very nice people, which is true, and Bill Henderson is an abstract painter and very distinguished. And so there were 2 or 3 of us in the society like this, and so over the years, and I've got more and more involved, and I'm now the honorary curator. Now the thing about watercolor is that there are 2 very different questions. One is simply the technique, and it is a very challenging, very wonderful technique, but to be very pedantic, there is this big difference between acrylic, gouache, and pure watercolor. And I was using gouache as watercolor for a long time as well, but then very luckily a couple of years ago I got I'm a great fan of Schminker paints, and they were asked for someone to do a demo, so I was filmed a whole day using, and I got they said, what colours do you want? I said, I think cobalt turquoise. And, it was all the most expensive things. I had a fantastic collection of things, and it was a bit awkward doing this, but a lot of fun. But the thing about real watercolour, as you may know, is it is so translucent, and it requires a very you can't revise things. You've got to be I read about this. It actually links in with the way you work digitally, I think. It's got a very similar kind of Zen aspect to it. You've got to be in the right groove. I think it's like acting. You have to have a rehearsal. You can't pianists have a green room, and I've known 1 or 2 pianists, and they go through all these rituals in the green room before going onto the stage to play. And I think watercolors like that, you've got to be rehearse a bit before and you never know whether you're going to get anything that works. And I do this also. I work on them vertically on the wall, which is weird because you've got the water. I mean, I also do them horizontally, but relation on the wall. But the other point about watercolor is it's perceived by the art or various art publics through a stereotype of it being rather amateur, Sunday painter, very much, harbours and cats and still lives.
Yeah.
And but the positive thing about it, in some ways, is that if you go throughout the touch watercolor on the whole, it's the most uncool medium to use.
Yeah.
There's nothing to do with concepts or ideologies, or it's rather feeble. But in reality, there are lots of artists I know, fellow painters, who do fantastic watercolors, but they didn't think of applying to the Watercolor Society of exhibiting because of that reason. But it's a perception that the good thing about being linked up with these amateur societies is it challenges your pretentiousness as a supposedly highbrow, or and but it is also quite. I think one thing I've learned is that you'd think that amateurs, the egos of amateurs are just as big as the egos of well-known artists. It's sort of
of course.
Not that I don't have an ego, but do you know what I mean? It's not. One example. I went to another local watercolor society and was chatting with them, and I said, "Well, sophisticated people," but I said, "So what do you think of what they show in Tate Modern?" And they said, "Oh, I've never been there." I said, "Well, why not?" "Oh, it's all ugly," and so you get this sort of, the barriers are on all different sides. It's very tribal.
Oh, it's interesting actually. I never thought of that. The both sides. It's a weird thing because I actually quite like a lot of. I mean, sometimes you can like those watercolors of cats, I find.
Well, we still do, maybe. But, I'm drawing. I'm drawing every day. I draw, plants and things like that, and it's not a sort of, just because you do digital art or abstract painting, it doesn't stop you drawing. I mean, why not?
Yeah.
And, I think these things are good. It's like, or maybe I'm just a bit split personality, but you have one. I think the nice thing of going between digital and watercolor. I mean, I've been in the sort of digital world quite a bit of art, and it's fascinating how little some people in that world know about mainstream art, and vice versa.
Yeah. So go on. So tell us about digital art. You got into doing the digital art partly through seeing the fluorescent fish, but I suppose you've been a bit of a pioneer in digital art in a way, have you?
Well, I was actually in it. Yeah, not really, because I wasn't there. I was in my 40s before I really got involved.
Okay.
And there had been people there before me. When I was at the Royal College, there was a computing department that was rumoured, and it turned out to be quite true, was working for the CIA doing, I believe.
Really?
Of analysing Agent Orange of the deforestation of Cambodia as it was then.
No.
But it was called something like the Mapping Society. But I was there were people I got to know, like a good friend in the USA who's in his 90s now, Roman Verosco, who had been there, considerably earlier, and they had to write their own software and things. But initially, it was very, very difficult because you couldn't have access. You'd pay, £300 or £400 for a morning working. Not that I ever did, because it was all to do with animation and things.
Oh, I see.
And the first systems I used you had a vast diagrams on the wall to show you the way through.
Wow.
But then I got, into the first one I bought for myself after using what was then the Apple II was an Amiga, which was a kind of spotty youth games machine, really.
I remember that.
A lot of fun. I had no hard disk or anything like that. But,
oh, wow.
But it was the reason. What was interesting about it, and I touched on this about watercolor, was not just the medium, but the attitudes around it. So I did have a gallery, and they wouldn't. They were very apprehensive about exhibiting some of the digital work because they said it wasn't really art. Paper was too thin, or that I hadn't done it. And it was, and I had great difficulty getting any teaching, and there would be, you know, fellow painting tutors would say they wanted to take a baseball bat to the computers, and it really was a hostility, and not just that, but complete incomprehension. I mean, I think it was at Central, and they eventually had a project which they called, if you use computers, it had to be about alienation in the city.
Oh man.
You know, all about the spooky, otherworldly things. And what I found was it was much the most natural things, and some of my colleagues were, you know, far more into nature and things than regular painters would be.
Yeah, yeah. And
but I don't think it's wonderful. I think it's got its limitations. You know, obviously. I mean, there's this divide and the digital world, and it's still there to some extent.
Do you print all of the images out that you make, or just some of them?
No. It's expensive. I mean, I have a large printer here which I hardly ever use anymore, and I'm more inclined to take the images to the studio and then use those as prompts for the paintings that I do. There's considerable cost in printing these pictures and framing them, so I would say not more than 5% would be stage, and then it depends on the possibility of exhibiting them. And there's it's still regarded as a sort of not a very viable form of print, if you like. And funny enough, the way most of that you often see in the countryside, there's little galleries, and they would say, we've got our giclée prints. Giclée means actually very little, but the one I've seen which says no mechanical process involved, and all you're doing is scanning a watercolor and doing that, whereas that is somehow legit, or people will find that acceptable. But if you say with my pictures, when often people say, well, where's the original? And I said, this is the original. There is not a physical thing that, you know, and I would like a pat on the back sometimes for saying you invented this yourself, kind of thing, rather than being treated as a like I said in that article. I used to, in fact, it was when I was briefly teaching at the Royal College when they had a computing department before they closed it down. And I was had to go up to the printmakers. This is 30 years ago, and they said, this isn't valid. And I said, okay, maybe it isn't valid. Oh, they said, well, it's not proper printmaking. I said, okay. And there's all these students hanging around and said, oh, they thought they'd got it over on me. Said the students were then asked to make all the prints they'd done, this is 30, and turn them into etchings or lithographs, and they would be legitimate. But I thought, I've got, there was one or two students I'm still in touch with, and in a morning you could do a print. I mean, this was before, when Photoshop just started, that was. You could print all the colours in one, that was unheard of until then, and the first colour printer I had, about 88, this was, you could do tiny pictures, but it was unheard of to be able to do this. And instead of jumping into it and saying, what a fantastic thing this is, there were these people who I now see in retrospect were just understandably resisting something that was quite threatening. I mean, look, I've got look at Paul Clay's notebooks. What would he do? Would you said, it's not art? I don't think so.
No, exactly. So it might be a bit of a, I mean, you don't have to answer this if you don't want to, but do you think David Hockney and all his iPad pictures and his digital prints, are they helping the whole theory of digital painting?
Oh yes, I'm a great fan. I think they're fantastic, and I sort of got some pictures I like more than others, but I think it's I've always enjoyed them. I am probably biased because when I was a student, he gave me a prize. So, It was a very kind of conceptual painting I had called Painting a Painting, which was sort of cartoon. But anyway, that was 1969, so or thereabouts. So,
okay, right.
I think the only thing is that he does, this was very apparent. There's this sort of antipathy towards abstract painting, and when we did the magazine, I interviewed, among other people, Kittai, and who I got on with well, but they have this sort of complete block about what they call abstract painting. And the press and there's always a kind of bias within England, which you don't get in other places, that thinks that the ultimate sort of thing about painting is to make it look like an old master and be figurative and representational, and it's all about your soul or your views or your this and that. And I spent ages looking at Constable's Haywain, when there are people not asking to be photographed in front of it. Fantastic painting, and it's you can look at it for so long and so many years. If you just look at the left edge and the right edge, there's so much going on in that. And I mean, what you have to remember is this was quite revolutionary at the time. They weren't used to pictures like that, and it's not about Constable's soul or anything like that. It's just a wonderful painting. It's and if you're an abstract painter, it doesn't mean you don't look at clouds or water or reflections.
Well, of course not.
But it's maybe that answers a question, which is about visual painting, as opposed to, I don't know. I think the main thing is that to be curious, and not to be too sort of, I'm probably too stuck in my ways, but to be surprised by things.
Yeah. No, I mean, Patrick Harran also always was going on about that thing about the British being so tied down to pretty, I suppose, what would you say, things that you could understand, as opposed to the prettier, more Bonnardy kind of paintings, wasn't he?
Yeah, I've got
Yeah. No, it's I mean I really like your paintings because I have made things on the computer, and I sometimes print out these little drawings, and I scan the drawings, and I colour them in Photoshop, and all those things, and it's fun, and it's exciting to use all those things, isn't it?
I think we have sometimes a mistaken idea of what happened in historical periods, and I got so struck by the and by the way, I don't feel this sort of, I know that digital stuff is not rejected now so much, of course, but 30 years ago it was different, and I even published eventually. I couldn't get it published in the UK, but I commissioned for a book in the USA about 14 years ago. And one of the things in researching that I came across, which struck me, was from Delacroix.
Okay.
And Delacroix said, contrary, you look at his paintings, which are very, they're fantastic, but they look back to Venetian painting and all sorts of things. You wouldn't think of him as a very necessarily progressive artist, but although he was in terms of colour, but somewhere he said, when about photography, oh gosh, he said, I wish this had been invented a bit earlier, so I could have made more use of it. And he's not saying, oh, photography, no. But I mean, they were, all of those people were, when they wanted to do down their rivals, they wanted something better than what their Ingres had or something like that. But they didn't, the thing about photography and painting, it took a long time to be absorbed, and it was initially, you could say, Brit misunderstood and this and that, and then it was used very secretly a lot, And my friends fellow digital artists in USA and things will, have observed the same things as I have, how this has gradually become absorbed into the processes artists use. It's taken for granted now.
It's interesting, actually. Would you say, it might be a kind of crazy idea, would you say you've got a slight sort of rebel attitude that likes to take things that are slightly contrary to what the art world expects? So say using watercolor, using digital mediums? Do you like to kind of subvert what people expect?
I don't think so. I think I'm very conservative and I had a lot of. I did have trouble as a student, and especially at the Royal College, I was failed initially.
Okay.
And I was totally first person since the Hockney failed there, and I didn't feel I'd done anything deliberately difficult. But I think I was perceived that way because I wanted to do something and they thought that was not the right way of doing it. And then I worked for some minimal artists in like Sol LeWitt, and I also found that I was uncomfortable there. I found it that there was I thought a lot of pretension and falseness, you know.
Okay. Interesting.
And then I don't think so. And then when we started Artscribe magazine, it wasn't to be rebellious or anything. It was because the magazine, there weren't any magazines dealing with painting and sculpture and other things.
Yeah.
So no, I don't think. I'm probably being sort of a bit arrogant, saying no. I think I wasn't deliberate yet. Maybe I was, but I never think that way. I mean, watercolor, come on, is the most. I'm just very bad at it. That's why I have to, try and get the hang of it. It's very difficult.
I think it's absolutely fascinating. I started the Art Top 10 thing. I started it to try and get more people to talk about art, but then obviously it mutates out of what you expected it to be. When you started Artscribe, did it end up as you expected it to be, the magazine? Did it?
Well, you say, how did we expect it to end up?
Well, I was saying with the videos I do, the Art Top 10 theory, it's just evolved on its own. Art Top 10 in a way. I wondered if Artscribe sort of.
This was before this. It started from with my friend Ben Jones. We had just artist meetings, usually at space studios, on people's studios all over London in very, very cold places. And the first sort of people we met with were like Bert Irvin, who. Okay. And it's hard to explain, but at that time there was, for example, I think there were a number of years there'd not been an exhibition of paintings at the Hayward Gallery, say. Okay. When you had new art shows, it was all other things, which were all, fascinating in their way. And then a lot of painters met together in a pub in Victoria in about 74, 75, thereabouts. And sort of wrote a letter, I think, to the Arts Council saying, why has this not happened? And so it was within that context. And we started the first issue was at the beginning of 76. And we had, it was like a fold-out newspaper. And had been writing reviews for Studio Magazine, and then they no longer would accept them because they were about painting. Oh, right. They had a different editor, they changed it. And so we did that, and we just sold it at private viewers and things for 20 pence, I think it was. What? And then gradually it sort of, we made a few sort of hiccups going along the way. But then after, I think 5 issues, we were going to stop. And then I said, look, if I am prepared to keep going. And it was all quite sort of friendly, but I ended up being the editor, and the 5th issue was purely on painting. Okay. And then we started getting advertising. Waddington Galleries helped us. They gave us they started taking out advertising, which meant other galleries would. And then we got a little subsidy from the Arts Council. And so it went through it was a very contentious time because there were all sorts of other art going on about art and social purpose and conceptual art here and there. But I wasn't exclusively on painting. We did have sort of performance and conceptual stuff in the magazine as well. Okay. And then of course it had to be, if you're running a magazine and the finances, the work, you've got to have subscribers, you've got to have advertisers, and you've got to do things like have well-known names to interview. Yeah. So we had Patrick Harran, and we had Frank Stella, and all these sort of people. And then then it became a kind of it was a lot of fun, gosh.
Yeah.
But it was very hard work, and I was painting in the studio too.
Yeah.
I couldn't do it now. And then after about 83, like I say, I came back from Australia, and I thought, I should stop, you know. And I didn't have much of an alternative, and in fact, it was very difficult to get a teaching job because they thought one of the characteristics of the magazine was the reviews were quite savage sometimes. And they all thought, as I was the editor, that I was behind it, and I might disagree with them. So I got just half a day teaching in Preston, teaching art history, not even painting. And it was quite a tough time. And then I was teaching at the London College of Fashion at that, drawing. So it was a lot. I didn't like walk into. I've been an important person, you know, as an editor, with people phoning me up on Sunday saying they wanted an article done, or they'd even, some artists who had the reputation for being very sincere would also send checks to say, you know, this is time I had an article.
Really?
And
please do that to me.
You had all that, and this is before the art world was as you know, had changed to YBA and all that, and it was already there. So I got out of it, but I would then go to a private view, and I would be the invisible person, you know, people who before come up and say, "Oh, I was." It was a sort of shock, but it was the right thing to do, maybe. Otherwise, I'd have been stuck. But we had some great people there, like, you know, Adrian Searle. Then became years later we only had Matt Collins made these TV programs. Terence Williams to Australia, all sorts of. Tim Hyman was also a writer, very figurative. So we've had a lot of. Doris Sarchi wrote for us, you know, so her copy arrived. It was a good, interesting time.
Oh, it sounds absolutely fascinating, actually. Absolutely fascinating. Now, James, I've absolutely loved chatting. I've loved seeing the pictures. We should probably begin to round it up soon.
Yes, of course.
Is there any other picture or image you'd like to show me before we finish?
No, I think I probably said enough. You know, I didn't mean to be. I just wanted to be clear, because often you know, you either get known for one thing, and do you paint as well? You know, and it's a bit frustrating to have. But no, it's. But thank you for the opportunity to do this. It's a lot easier than trying to write something out. Gosh.
Yes, exactly. Well, I initially actually wrote all the Art Top 10. I used to go and review exhibitions, and I would write them all out, type them all out longhand. But my son was watching YouTube videos, and I realised there was just no point. Why was I writing these things when all these people were just going to watch YouTube? So I thought, let's just do it all on YouTube.
I think the trouble is that the thing about painting and writing, that I really don't know what I think or what I want to do until you get into the process. And there's very often I was very pleased to be asked to do these things over the past by Instant Loveland, strange title, but it's, you know, I didn't really know what I thought until you really sort of untangle the ideas. Can I just show you one little thing? Just happens to be here. One of my closest friends from the Artscribe days was who died 18 years ago, Stuart Morgan, and I was writing this piece in the last few months about. I wanted to find out. Surely I've got a book with Brack's studio in it, and I didn't. I had to buy, you know. And I was looking through this, and this postcard slipped out. I want to show it to you because it's was from Stuart Morgan, written to me in 1980. But what's interesting about it, apart from this, it's about. Can you see there? Yeah. Is that in the top left, the stamp he stamped is a Royal Mail stamp about information technology, and the images are from a Greek Egyptian hieroglyphics to a Victorian library to someone in a white coat, very painfully using desktop. We were trying to make a desktop thing, so I thought that was extraordinary. And and Stuart was a very good friend, and he was he curated exhibitions for the Tate, and was partly responsible for Louise Bourgeois becoming better known.
Oh, right.
But he was a lot of fun, very, very witty. But unfortunately, he died in 1982. Oh. He was exactly the same age, so I just wondered what he would have done.
Yeah. No.
He had a great sense of humour.
It would have been interesting. But anyway, absolutely loved chatting.
Thank you.
I'm very, very interested. I really like the whole watercolour, digital art, oil painting, and the fact they all come into your oeuvre and your output. And as ever, everybody I talk to, I'm so impressed that you do a watercolour every day or a digital painting every day. I'm always impressed with people's output. Yeah, it's amazing.
Thank you. I wish it worked.
Anyway, we better say goodbye, but thank you so much. I've really enjoyed chatting. Thank you, James.
Thank you.
Cheers. Bye.